Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. I'm Spudlow, and in this video I'm going over a 2,500 point battle between the Lizardmen and the Dark Elves, both using the new codexes for 8th edition. Now, I'm playing the Lizardmen and Patrick's playing the Dark Elves, both for the first time using the new codex, so we just had to look at Army Builder and throw some stuff together and see how it works. For my side, 30 Temple Guard with the Banner of Swiftness, so they have +1 movement. I'm trying to get myself into combat a little faster. 2 units of 27 Saurus Warriors, 10 Skinks, not the Chameleon Skinks, but just the regular Skinks, so they're not going to have the scouting ability. I also have 5 Cold One Riders. I do realize that these are the Dark Elf models, but they're actually on my side. They're proxies for the Cold One Riders. Since Joseph's still out for a while, we have to make do with what models from the Lizardmen army we can get. So we had to proxy a few things, such as the Salamanders, which are actually being portrayed by 2 large blue Croxigors with some skinks behind them. And a Stegodon, which is a stand-in for a Bastillodon that has a solar engine which I don't end up using, even though that was the point of taking it, was so I could use it, and I didn't use it. Finally, I've got 3 Ripperdactyl Riders, which are actually 2 Pterodons, 2 broken Pterodons, and a Chimera, I believe. I painted that thing for Patrick. It looks pretty decent. Character-wise, I've got a Saurus Scar Veteran, BSB, who has the Jaguar standard, so it gives that unit Swift Stride. Again, trying to get my army into combat as quick as I can. I also have a Slan, who has the Cube of Darkness, which dispels on a 2+, and then additionally will dispel any other remains in play effects on a 2+. He also has Becalming Cogitation, which in the new book allows you to re-roll your first failed dispel in each magic phase. And Harmonic Convergence, which allows you to channel an extra 2 dice each magic phase. So I really tried to make the Slan as magic defensive as possible. Lizardmen having a low initiative, I know they're a sitting duck for the Lore of Shadows with that Pit of Shades spell, so I tried to make something that would give me the ability to counter as much stuff as possible. And to that end, I also took 2 level 1 Skink Priests. One of them has a Dispel Scroll, and the other has the Scepter of Stability, which will add a d6 to your Dispel attempt after you've already rolled your Dispel dice. Kind of nice being able to go, oh, chuck another d6 in there. Both of them took the Lore of Beasts. They rolled for some spells, but I swapped them both for Wyson's Wild Form, one of the best signature spells in the game, in my opinion. For his forces, he has 2 units of 50 Dark Elf Spearmen, 1 unit of, I think, about 50 Witches that has the Cauldron of Blood, and that thing really gives some significant buffs to your units now. All kinds of crazy stuff. And his final unit, he has a unit of 5 Shades. They've got the repeater crossbows, and they can scout and stuff like that. Character-wise, he has a level 4 that ends up with Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, Enfeebling Foe, Pit of Shades, and Occam's Mindrazor. Then a level 1 who gets Searing Doom. That's a magic missile who took the Lore of Metal. And then a BSB who's got some gear on him. All I remember from the game is that he gets 3 extra attacks, I believe. So he's got to have that not sort of ruin, but sort of whatever it is that gives you 3 extra attacks. My Slan, I didn't tell you the spells. My Slan ends up going for the Lore of Shadow as well. Gets the Withering, Occam's Mindrazor, Penumbral Pendulum, and I did roll Pit of Shades, but I actually tossed it for Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. Since the Dark Elves are already initiative 5, if I throw an initiative check on him, I'm causing 1 out of every 6. So even if I target a unit of 50, I might do like 7 wounds. Not really that great considering the casting cost of it. For scenario, we first rolled and got Meeting Engagement, which was the last game that we played, so we decided to pass on that. We re-rolled and got Watchtower and said screw that, so we ended up with Battle for the Pass on our 3rd roll. He ends up picking the board side and deploying first. He puts down that lower left unit of 50 spearmen, and we decided to play the central terrain as a house, and this is very important, a 2-level house. Knowing that, we've got 2 different ways that you can pass through it. With 3 large horde blocks on his side, he's only going to be able to come around one side with 2 of those units. A 3rd unit is going to have to go on the opposite side, wherever that is. Pretty much my strategy is going to be go for the weaker side with all of my strengths, and don't worry about the other side, just play a runaway battle. So with his first unit of 50 spearmen down, I go for my unit of Temple Guard. Given their size, I keep them in horde formation. I probably should have switched them to 5 wide, which I do with my other 2 units. But they're a little bit bigger. Okay, I'll keep them 10 wide. Alright, that's fine. He goes ahead and puts down his second block of 50 spearmen on the same side as his first block. Now I know his witches are going to have to go on the top side of the house, so my strategy is pretty much hammered down. I want to go for the 2 blocks of 50. I don't want to mess with the witches. They're going to tear through me a lot easier. I go ahead and put down a unit of Blue Saurus at the bottom right there by the hill, but I give myself enough room in front to put some of my other units. I do end up trying to deploy some of my smaller stuff around the back to prevent him from getting the flank in with his shadows, with his shades. But that really would have been irrelevant. If you think about the amount of wounds that they're going to do, yes, they're going to do some wounds to you, but it should not have altered my battle strategy that much. I should have put that Bastillodon and my Pterodon, or my Riperdactyls, way up front and said, heck with it. Go ahead, take your rear shots, shoot a few things. I'm not afraid of that. But I didn't, so don't fear the shades. That's the important part. He puts his Witch Elves up top, which pretty much leaves me with my other Saurus block. Since they're going to get jammed up if I try to put them down low, I go ahead and put them toward the top as a little tempting thing. It's like, here, match your Witch Elves up with this, even though those green Saurus aren't going anywhere near those witches. He's out of his units to deploy at this point, other than his scouts, so I got to deploy the rest of mine. I go ahead and put down the Stegodon and the Pterodon riders off to the sides, and I space them enough so that there's nowhere he can be 12 inches away from me and be behind my line. So his shades have to deploy in front. Again, this is kind of silly. I had enough room to put the Stegodon and the Flyers and the Chameleons all in front of that Blue Saurus unit, and that's what I should have done. But I didn't. Still being silly. Cold One Riders, however, at least I put them in a relatively decent place. They're fast, they can get around things, so I'm not too worried about them. Salamanders come down in front of the Blue Saurus, and the Skinks come down next to them, so... Got my Slan, of course, goes in with the Temple Guard. Then I've got my BSB, which I originally put in with my Temple Guard. Remember, no, don't do that, because he's got the banner of... He's got the Jaguar standard, and the Temple Guard have the banner of Swiftness. There's no point in putting them both together. So I put him in with the Blue Saurus to help the Blue Saurus and the Temple Guard can both get out there a little bit faster. All 3 of his characters go in with the Central Spearmen. So I know that's where all the points are. That's the unit I actually want to try to kill right there. For my Skinks, one of them goes in with the Blue Saurus and one goes in with the Green. Of course, since they're different base sizes, they have to be just outside, or adjacent to the unit at the very front rank. He puts his shades down right in front of the house. Probably planning on going into the house. Neither of us had very much shooting at all, so shooting is a very quick phase this entire game. We roll for stealing the first turn, or not stealing the first turn, but we roll for first turn. He has a +1, but I still end up getting the higher roll, so I go first. So we go into turn 1. I have the Chameleons jet out in front, hoping to take some shots at something. Hopefully the Shades, they can exchange shots. That's kind of our shooting matchup for the game. I go ahead and have the Temple Guard reform to 5 wide and move forward. The Cold Ones jockey around the house That's the reason for reforming the Temple Guard, is I want to be able to get the Temple Guard and the Cold Ones in on the same round of combat. That would be awesome. Ripperdactyls fly up, and that is a bit of a mistake, but I didn't really realize it at the time. But you'll see. You'll see how it turns out over on his face. All kinds of goodness. On to magic for my turn 1. After all of our channeling attempts, I end up with 10 power dice versus his 8 dispel dice. I use my first 4 for withering at the higher level on the central spearman, and he uses 5 of his dice to dispel it. That's a good one because that's a remains in play spell, so you want to catch that one when you get a chance. I use the next 4 for penumbral pendulum, which fails. I don't get a high enough casting cost for it. So I'm left with 2 dice for Weisson's Wild Form, which I try on the Ripperdactyls to try to give them a little more toughness, since I realize they're only toughness 3. Not a good thing when they're sitting that close to the shades. But the casting cost for Weisson's Wild Form is quite high, so my skink only having a +1 ends up failing. We're over to the Dark Elves side, and the only movements that he does is moving the shades into the house, and then he moves his witch elves up. Both units of spearmen stay where they are. He's not going to move. He wants his witches in combat and nothing else. His magic phase ends up being 5 versus 4. He uses 3 dice to dispel the withering, and then uses his last 2 for Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the salamanders, which I go ahead and dispel with my 4 since it doesn't have anything left. In shooting, the shades shoot for the Ripperdactyls and end up causing enough to kill off 1 of the guys. I think he did 3 wounds, and he killed 1 of the models. Forces a fear check, which they fail because they are leadership 5. Now kind of seeing the downside to Ripperdactyls. They fear, they flee, they run, and they actually will not be rallying for the rest of the game. So, wonderful Ripperdactyls took wounds, fly off the board. Good job, guys. Glad I spent those points. With no combat, we go over to turn 2. I start out, I don't actually charge anything. The only thing that would have had a chance would have been the Cold One Riders, and I didn't really want them to get into combat by themselves. So I go ahead and move everything else up. Move the Skinks and the Croxagores up. Croxagores have a good chance to do some flaming attacks. They're at a decent distance at this point. I move the other units up. Hopefully we can get some charges next turn. Or if he decides to charge my front chaff units, he's going to overrun and hit me. At least then I'll still be in combat. That's fine. Just move the green source up a little bit. Just enough to make it tempting for him to charge. I would rather have him charge and fail than march. If he marches, he's going to move 10 inches towards me. If he charges and fails, I might be able to get him only moving 4 or 5 inches per turn. Much, much nicer for me. Means it's going to be a lot longer before those witch elves are able to get into combat. Magic this time ends up 9 versus 5. I got a good amount of channeling dice this time. I use 5 dice for Wither, which he dispels with a scroll, and then 4 more dice for Weisson's Wild Form on the salamanders, which he goes ahead and dispels with his 5 dice. The reason for putting Weisson's on the salamanders, if he charges me, I could actually move my guys up to toughness 5, which would be pretty nice. Toughness 5 with a reasonably decent armor save. They've got a good chance of at least surviving that combat, possibly, even though he's going to have the ranks on me. Who knows? But at least that was the logic behind it. I didn't realize until towards the end of the game the Solar Engine has a bound spell that I wanted to use. It's only power level 3, but you still have to use dice if you want to cast the stinking thing. And I kept using up all my dice in like the first 2 turns, and I'm like, oh gee, I should have held back at least 1 die and tried the Solar Engine spell. Would have been nice, but just wasn't thinking about it. Wasn't used to using the good old bound spells. Over to shooting. I shoot at the bigger spearmen with the salamanders and for the skinks. I end up doing, I believe, 7 wounds total. That's out of one good flame blast from the salamanders. One of them falls short. And then the skinks attacks, I think, which take off one or maybe two more. Over to the Dark Elves. He goes ahead and charges my skinks with his central spearmen and my salamanders with his lower spearmen. At first, I thought the salamanders had to hold and take a stand and shoot. The Razorbacks have to stand and shoot if they have the opportunity to. But salamanders, there's nothing that says that they have to hold their ground for any reason, and they can't actually stand and shoot. So I go ahead and have them flee, as well as the skinks. They flee through a couple of units. My units are within range of the general and the BSB, and they're cold-blooded, so they pass them without any problem. The only difficult part is that the salamanders, I know at this point, aren't going to be able to get back into combat. More than likely, they're going to rally given their position. They're close to the leader and the BSB, so they won't have any problem turning around next turn. Unfortunately, they're going to turn around and they're not going to be able to have a clear shot on anything. Even if I don't get a charge next turn, you're not going to be able to put the template down. You can't shoot over your own unit. It's intervening. There's a chance of hitting it, so you can't even lay the template down. So unfortunately, they're not going to get to see any more action this game. Little skinks, they run. Hey, that's half of what they do, is messing up people's charges. So they did their job. He goes ahead and moves the witches up as well and kind of angles them around the house. He really wants to get that flank charge on those Temple Guard. I know that's what he's aiming for, so I just want to get the Temple Guard out of the way first. Put those green Saurus up there and say, you want to charge something, come charge me. For Magic, he ends up rolling a 2 and a 1, so we don't get any channels. So it's 3 power dice versus 2 dispel dice. He uses a power scroll, though, the one that cuts the casting cost of a spell in half, and goes for Pit of Shades, which I go ahead and use the spell scroll on. I'm going to try, even though I could re-roll the dispel attempt, it was still too high of a casting cost. I'm like, all right, that's okay. Cast the first one off, dispel scroll used, and a magic phase. In shooting, the Shades go ahead and shoot for the Cold One Riders, and you get some wounds, but they just blink off the armor. Over to turn 3, since my Temple Guard are too far back to do anything of value on this round, I decided to go ahead and charge the Blue Saurus and the Cold One Riders into that big central spearman block. Blue Saurus have that Swift Stride banner, so I'm going to get to roll 3 dice, take the 2 highest. Looks like it has a very good chance of getting both of those units into combat, which would do me real well, since the Blue Saurus hopefully will have enough ranks, he won't remain steadfast. Hopefully the Cold One Riders will do enough damage so I win the combat. Win the combat, he's not steadfast, decent chance he might break and run. And if I've got Swift Stride from both units, I'm definitely cutting him down. Unfortunately, I don't roll high enough for the Blue Saurus, and they don't make it into combat. Just the Cold Ones do, which is exactly what I didn't particularly want to have happen, but oh well. I find out later on that I didn't actually pay for the spears on the Cold One Riders anyway, so there you go. Read the fine point. Click the necessary boxes in Army Builder. Always make sure you click that box. It's important. Otherwise, my Temple Guard and Stegodon, Bastiladon move up. The Skinks and the Salamanders rally, and the Green Saurus just kind of sit where they are. They're just chilling in the back. For Magic, after channels, I end up with 7 power dice versus 4 dispel dice. I use my first 4 dice for Withering on the central spearman, and he decides to let this one go since I'm going to be wounding on 3s anyway. It lowers their toughness by 3. My last 3 dice I use for Weisson's Wild Form, trying to get it on those cold ones. And once again, since it's a 10 casting cost, and my skink only has a +1, I fail and don't get it off. Oh well. Shooting-wise, the Little skinks go ahead and shoot at the shades and actually manage to kill off 2 of them, but they don't panic. For combat, my Cold One Riders end up taking 3 wounds, 3 of my Cold Ones down, and I end up doing 3 or 4 in return, I believe. I think I did 4 or 5. I win the combat and have the charge, but with his ranks, he ends up winning the combat, but I pass the cold-blooded leadership test that I've got. So they stay in combat for 1 more turn. Okay. On to the bottom of 3. He goes ahead and charges with his Witch Elves and with his lower Spearmen into the Blue Saurus. The lower Spearmen make it, but the Witches actually fail the charge, so they only move forward a few inches. Yes, we won it. Magic ends up after 2 successful channels for him, 2 out of 2. He gets 12 versus 7 for his magic phase, and this is where things start to get a little dicey. He uses 4 for Enfeebling Foe on the Blue Saurus, and I go ahead and use the cube to dispel it. Then he uses 6 dice for Occam's Mind Razor, and I go ahead and use 6 dice to dispel it, and I add the extra +1 in as well to make sure I get the dispel. So that one gets taken out. Finally, he uses 2 dice, his last 2, for Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma on the Blue Saurus, which I don't have any dice left to dispel. Actually, I think I had 1 die that I could dispel with, but there was no point. He rolled high on his 2 dice. So that's -2 to all of the statistics for the Blue Saurus. That's not all the statistics, but weapon skill, initiative, ballistic skill, and movement. For shooting, his shades shoot at the skinks and kill a couple of them off, but not enough to cause a panic test. In combat, I'm expecting the Saurus to lose, but to stay steadfast since they've got the ranks. And actually, after all wounds are rolled, and thanks to those 4+ armor saves and some 6+ ward save goodness, I actually take less wounds. Even with the charge that he's got, and we each have a banner, I end up winning the combat by 2, but he's within range of the General and the BSB, and he passes his 2nd attempt at the break test. So they don't break, but things look pretty good for me next round. In the other combat, however, things don't go quite so well. The cold ones get killed off before they get to swing. So much for that one. At least he doesn't get to overrun into the Temple Guard. Frees up the Temple Guard to do the flank charge in on that unit of spearmen. Get them out of the way. And maybe even get the Temple Guard kind of off the board, out of the way. Would be nice. On to turn 4. I go ahead and have my skinks charge the house with the shades. The Temple Guard charge into the flank of the lower spearman unit. Then I have the green Saurus step into the house. Take a little sideways step into the house, get them out of the way of the witches. My magic phase ends up 7 versus 3. I use 4 dice for Weisson's Wild Form on the Blue Saurus, which he attempted to dispel with 3 dice, but he didn't actually make it. So that gives the Blue Saurus +1 strength, +1 toughness, which that's definitely helpful for me. I use the last 3 for Melkoth's to do -1 to all the stats for the spearmen, the lower spearmen. In our combats, the skinks take down a couple of shades, and they lose a couple of skinks in the process, but the shades, being stubborn in the house, pass their break test, so the skinks bounce back. Sitting there, a nice prime target for the witches. It's just fine. Skinks know how to run. And in our big lower combat, the Blue Saurus and Temple Guard take out the spearmen without too much problem. Don't wipe them out, cut them down enough so that they need a snake eyes. They run, and the direction of their fleeing is away from the unit with the most ranks, which is the Temple Guard. So they run towards the edge of the board. Both units pursue, and the Temple Guard end up not quite far enough to the board edge to get them off the board. The Blue Saurus run off the board. The Temple Guard just don't quite make it, which ends up causing problems in the last turn of the game. As we go into the bottom of turn 4, there are a couple of things that didn't get played out correctly. He charges the skinks, I go ahead and run with them. He fails the charge, goes a little ways around the house, no big deal. He charges his big spearman block into the flank of my temple guard. When he actually does the charge, he doesn't hold the pivot point down, he slides them over, and he actually ends up getting a few extra rows into combat that shouldn't have been there. But in the magic phase, he casts Occam's Mindrazor on this unit. And first he tries to cast Pit of Shades, and I use dice to dispel that. He has 6 left to go for Occam's Mindrazor. I let this go because I am convinced you still get your armor save for Occam's Mindrazor. Had to look it up in several different places. No, you don't. I know this is probably rookie error of the year for me. No, you don't get your armor save. So, if he'd had that armor save, he would have won this combat by enough that I would not have been able to make a reform, and I might not have actually been steadfast either. That unit probably would have been wiped out. But he also got more attacks off than he should have. How it would have worked out, we probably should have gone back and you can take a look at it, do the math, figure out how it should have been. But if that unit dies and he overruns, next turn Bluesaurus can come back on, and I've still got a couple of Salamanders and the Bastiladon that I can try to get into that combat after Pit of Shades or after Occam's Mindrazor is worn off. So, who knows, turn 5, turn 6, what would have transpired if the Witch Elves could make it around the house? Obviously things aren't going to be good. But if the Bluesaurus and the Bastiladon can pull off a charge on that remaining Spearman unit, then this is probably going my way. As it is, we play the armor saves, so even though I lose the combat, I'm steadfast, and I'm able to reform amid defeat and turn towards him. Now I've actually got several more attacks that I can do, and when we work out the attacks from turn 5, which I don't think we're on camera, I don't think we went that far, I basically reformed the unit and we called the game at that point. Bastiladon might be good in combat, I don't know. The Solar Engine, Bound Spell Magic Missile might be good, I don't know. Didn't get to see. Ripperdactyls might be good. Probably not. They have only a 6+ Scaly Skin save, I believe, and being Toughness 3, that kind of makes them a bit of a pincushion for any decent shooting. And something that has, Ballistic Skill 5 of the Shades. If you get in close, anywhere near close for that matter, they're going to double tap, poison you, and blow the crud out of you, which is what they did. In Leadership 5, you're not coming back. Bye. See you later. Have fun drinking beers back while you're hanging from the jungle trees. Yeah. But this was still a fun game. I want to try Lizardmen again. I want to try a few different things. I want to try getting an Ancient Stegodon up there with some blowpipes and maybe throw a Carnosaur in there. See how that goes. So next game, might try a little bit different. We'll see. Maybe we'll have some different makeups, utilize some different techniques from the Dark Elves and the Lizardmen. But we'll save that for next time. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know what you think. Do me a favor and subscribe. Like the video if you want to see more. And as always, leave me some comments if you have any tactics or matchups you'd like to see. Till next time, this is Budlow saying, keep fighting.